Senator from Vermont.
Mr. President, I would ask that the quorum call be vitiated.
Without objection.
Thank you. Mr. President, today I want to spend a few minutes discussing a major crisis in this country that must be addressed. Tragically, in the United States of America, we now have 2.2 million people in jail. That is more people incarcerated than any other country on earth, including China, which is a communist authoritarian country 4 times our size. We have more people in jail than does China. Further, at a time of large deficits and a very large national debt, we are spending about $80 billion a year in federal, state, and local taxpayer money to lock people up. $80 billion a year to incarcerate people. Mr. President, our criminal justice system is broken, and we need major reforms in that system. I think there is no debate in this country that violent and dangerous people must be locked up and they must be kept in jail and away from society. I think nobody argues that. On the other hand, I would hope that there is also no debate that nonviolent people, people who have been convicted of relatively minor crimes, should not have their lives destroyed while they do time in prison, create an arrest record which will stay with them for their entire lives. The important point here is it is not just the year, the 2 years that somebody is in prison. This record will stay with them for their entire lives and do enormous damage to their lives. Mr. President, in 2014, there were 620,000 marijuana possession arrests. That is 1 arrest every minute. According to a report by the ACLU, there were more than 8 million marijuana arrests in the United States from 2001 to 2010. 8 million marijuana arrests, and almost 9 in 10 were for possession. Arrests for marijuana possession rose last year nationwide, even as Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and the District of Columbia became the first states in the nation to legalize personal use of marijuana. And let's be clear that there is a racial component to this situation. Although about the same proportion of blacks and whites use marijuana, a black person is almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana possession than a white person. In other words, as we try to understand why our prison population today is disproportionately black and Latino, one of the reasons is that because of over-policed black neighborhoods, African Americans are much more likely to be arrested for smoking or using marijuana than will whites. And here's the simple truth. An upper-middle-class white kid in Scarsdale, New York, has a much, much lower chance of being arrested for using marijuana than a low-income black kid in Chicago or Baltimore. Those are just the facts. Mr. President, too many Americans in this country have seen their lives destroyed because they have criminal records as a result of marijuana use. That is wrong. That has got to change. Let's be clear. A criminal record could mean not only jail time, but much, much more. If a person has a criminal record, it will be much harder for that person later in life to get a job. Not so easy coming out of jail getting a job. And if you don't get a job, there is a strong likelihood you're going to get back into your same old environment and end up in jail again. If somebody has a criminal record, it may be impossible for them to obtain certain types of public benefits and make it difficult, in fact, for them even to live in public housing. A criminal record stays with a person for his or her entire life until the day he or she dies. A criminal record destroys lives. Mr. President, right now, under the Controlled Substance Act, marijuana is listed as a Schedule I drug, meaning that it is considered to be a drug that is extremely dangerous. In fact, under the Act, marijuana is considered to be as dangerous as heroin. Now, I know there are conflicting opinions about the health impacts that marijuana may have, but nobody that I know seriously believes that marijuana is as dangerous as heroin. This is absurd. Nobody believes that. In my view, the time is long overdue for us to take marijuana off of the federal government's list of outlawed drugs. In my view, at a time when Colorado, Washington, Oregon, Alaska, and the District of Columbia have already legalized the personal use of marijuana, every state in this country should have the right to regulate marijuana the same way that state and local laws now govern sales of alcohol and tobacco. Among other things, that means that recognized businesses in states that have legalized marijuana should be fully able to use the banking system without fear of federal prosecution. Mr. President, in response to the initiatives that Colorado and other states have taken, the Obama administration has essentially allowed these states to go forward and to do what the people in those states have chosen to do. That's a good step forward, but it is not good enough, because a new administration with a different point of view could simply go forward and prosecute those marijuana businesses and individuals in the state who use marijuana, despite what the people in those states have decided to do legislatively. What I'm saying today is not that the federal government should legalize marijuana throughout the country. This is a decision for the states. And I would hope that many of my colleagues, especially those who express support for states' rights and our federalist system of government, those who often decry the power of the big, bad federal government in undermining local initiatives, would support my very simple and straightforward legislation, which will be introduced next week. All that legislation says is that if a state chooses to legalize marijuana, that state should be able to go forward without legal impediments from the federal government. Mr. President, let me also talk about another issue of great importance in this country, and that is that I believe the time is now for the United States to end capital punishment. Now, I know that this is not necessarily a popular point of view, but it is, in my view, the right point of view. Right now, virtually every Western industrialized country has chosen to end capital punishment. I would rather have our country stand side by side with European democracies rather than with countries like China, Iran, Saudi Arabia, and others who maintain the death penalty. Mr. President, we are all shocked and disgusted by some of the horrific murders that we see in this country, including massacres in schools and on college campuses that seem to take place every week. And all of us are just tired and disgusted with what we are seeing. But it seems to me that at a time of rampant violence and murder all over the world, where people are being blown up and their heads are being cut off, it is important that the state itself, the federal government, here in America, say loud and clearly that we will not be part of that process. When people commit horrendous crimes, and we see too many of them, we should lock them up and throw away the key. I have no problem in saying that people who commit terrible murders should spend the rest of their lives in jail. But the state itself, in a democratic, civilized society, should itself not be involved in the murder. Now, I know that there are strong differences of opinion on this issue, and in fact, I think I am in a minority position. But I think that those of us who want to set an example, who want to say that we have got to end the murders and the violence that we're seeing in our country and all over the world, should in fact be on the side of those of us who believe that we must end capital punishment in this country. And with that, Mr. President, I would yield the floor.